Welcome back everyone, Mudford here. Today Jeremiah and I are out in the shop working on his little sister's quad. This is Grace's ATV hair scramble quad. She ended up getting first place in points last season in the mini division. But the quad really isn't that fast. She just finished consistently. But I think there's going to be a lot more competition this year. So we're just going to spice hers up just a little bit. So there's not a lot of real options for these DS90Xs. They are an excellent quad, but there's not much you can do aftermarket to make them faster. The only thing that I've seen is the Hetrick Racing Power Up B kit. This is the best kit I've seen. Full exhaust right here, big gun. The intake, the carb, and the air. It also comes with a heavy-duty throttle cable. I haven't got the chain in the rear sprocket yet. We did get the chain tensioner, and that looks pretty beefy. We have had some spring tensioner issues with hers, stock one, during the race, so I'm glad to get that. And we'll do the chain tensioner, the chain and sprocket, and the clutch springs. So I'm going to start out by taking the old exhaust off, and I think the first thing I'm going to do before I do that is get these Nerf bars right out of the way. That'll give us a little more room to work. So I'm at least going to take off this side. We're going to go ahead and take these two bolts out. It's a Phillips and then a 10mm on the back side, so that this piece will come out with the Nerf bar. You gonna come here and hold this, Jeremiah? Hold it right here like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna spin this out of the way for now. I'm gonna go ahead and put the bolts and the nuts back in the fender so they don't get lost. Okay, now we're gonna get the bolts out on the foot pegs here. It's a 12 on the bolt side and a 13 on the nut side. Okay, now we're going to get the bolt out right here, same size. Okay, now we got to get the netting loose from the frame before we take the Nerf bar off. So there's 3 straps going through here over the frame. I took the bolt out through the tubing here, but it also goes through this clamp right here on the frame, which I got loosened a little bit. But I'm not sure how it's going to come apart. Okay, a little bit of prying. And there we have it. That really didn't help us too much, but it did give us a little bit of room where I can get in closer now. I'm going to have to take a bunch of covers off next. Okay, I got the chain cover off. There's just 3 screws holding that on. And you can see the last time her chain fell off, really did a number on the little tiny pipe here. smashed it in a little bit. Next thing we're going to do is just go ahead and get the exhaust loose here off the engine. There's just two 10mm nuts for that. From the other, you can kind of get to this nut from the other side. Not the greatest though. Okay, I got the front disconnected. There is another bolt right here by the right side of the rear fender where the muffler slides onto the pipe. I've gotten that loose. Now we have our two bolts holding the muffler onto the frame. We're going to go ahead and get those loose maybe. So there's two bolts holding the muffler on, one here and one up there. And they also have a nut on the back side. I wish they could have welded it into the frame, but we'll figure it out here. Okay, we got those out. Now hopefully this muffler will slide right off. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be quite a treat here. I'm not even sure how this would come out of there. I think we're going to have to take the motor loose, because this skid plate, there's a plate underneath it here that appears to be welded onto the frame, so it's not going to drop down. So I think the motor's going to have to slide. I think the motor might have to come up a little. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get these out. I'm going to pull these covers off and see what I got for room to move the engine up. I was going to be doing this anyway because the intake is going to be right behind this cover. Okay, we got those three bolts out. Now we'll get this out. Add that to our pile of parts over here. So I went ahead and took the foot peg off. It was just the two bolts through the side here with nuts on the other side. And once you take them out, there's a bolt coming down from the top with a nut on the bottom. You can take that off and then slide the whole assembly off. So that lets me get in a little closer without having that sticking out ready to impale me. So now I'm going to take this motor mount here loose and then go around and take the one loose on the other side on the front and see if we can't rock this motor up a little. And then maybe we'll be able to rock the motor up enough to be able to get the exhaust to pop out. For some reason they put a hanger that you can't really see, and it goes from the exhaust, it's welded on the backside where you can't see it, to this bolt here where the shifter bracket is. So somehow we have to get in there and get that bracket out in order to get this exhaust loose. Okay, if you actually move the shifter into forward, you have plenty of room to get to that bolt. I had it in reverse before. Now I can get my socket on. And there we go. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and take the bracket right off. Now we're loose here. Put the shifter back into forward. This is part of the exhaust right here. And there's a rubber hose coming from up under there that hooks on, and there's a little clamp. So you got to take that off as well. And we're going to just keep wiggling this around. You can see I've got the motor up here. I had to take all of the motor mounts out to get this to move the way I wanted. And I just gotta figure out how to wiggle it to get it out of here. So there's just two 5/16 or 8mm head bolts holding this intake on. Then I'm just gonna have to disconnect the choke cable, the throttle cable, and the fuel line from the carburetor. So I took the cover off that went right over here over the petcock and the hoses, and then I put the petcock back on. You'll have to take that screw out to take it off. And here's the air box here. That is probably what we're hitting on. is this airbox. You can see there's not a lot of room. So we're gonna go ahead and see if we can't get this airbox off of here and take it right off with the carburetor. Looks like we have a ground wire that goes to the carburetor. So we're gonna have to take that bolt loose. But the first thing I'm gonna do is try to get this airbox, figure out what's holding it. I think there's a screw, one screw from the back side, probably another one from the other side back in there. See if we can get a look at it. Yeah, you can get a long Phillips screwdriver through from this side and take those screws right out, and this should get the airbox loose. I'm sure there's going to be a few other things we'll have to unhook, like the carburetor boot. So we got the airbox off. There was a little breather hose on the front towards the top, and then this one just hangs down. So hopefully we're going to be able to reuse this. If you were going to race motocross, you'd probably just leave this off, but racing XC or hare scrambles, you kind of want to be protected a little more from the elements, because you do have mud and water that we go through. So before we get this engine out, I got to get the chain off, and the carburetor the rest of the way off, and some wiring. So here's our old setup. You can see the size of the carburetor. It's pretty small, and that intake is pretty small. Here's a good view of the difference. This one's a lot bigger. The biggest thing I don't like is the choke. On the old one, she could operate it from the handlebars, and that's not going to be the case with the new one. I don't know if you can notice, but there is a little bit of a difference here. The new one is a little bit bigger. We should get some better flow through this new one, and the carb is just huge difference in size. I've done a little more work to get this engine ready to come out. I took the shifter off right here. It's just a bolt on the pinch part of it, just like a normal shifter. Pulled that out. I also took the front sprocket off. You have to take these two bolts out from the sprocket, turn that retainer, and then you can slide the whole sprocket right off. I've unhooked some grounds. I've unhooked some wires. I put the new carburetor and intake on just to kind of see how it was, because it's different. And I really don't like where it goes on here. I got it in here kind of loose. I don't really like the way this new setup is. The old one kind of came straight back over here. I'm not sure how well you can see up there, but the new one comes in right behind where the petcock is and the fuel lines are on the bottom of the tank. Just kind of crowded right there, and then the air filter is going to stick out right there. I'm probably going to put some kind of a turn on it here so I can get some kind of an air box on it. The Hetrick kit, of course, is set up for motocross, and it doesn't worry about the air box, but we ride in the woods, and a lot of times there's water and mud, and we just want to have an air box to protect that air filter a little bit. So I'm probably just going to fab something up out of tin and put it right underneath it here. But I think I'm ready to take this back off, and I think I can pull the engine right out, and I'm going to get it up on the workbench for doing the cylinder head work. Okay, we got Grace's engine up on the bench now. The reason why we're going to be doing some work on this engine is because if you look at this, this is the old intake, and you can see the size of the holes match up here. And then this is the new one. It's definitely a little bit bigger diameter. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some grinding in here and smooth it out and hopefully get some better flow. Mostly on the bottom side, we're going to do grinding inside and try to get it some more flow and hopefully just really wake this engine up. Total disclosure, I haven't had one of these engines apart before. This is our first engine like this. So I'm going to take some of the side covers off here. I don't see what holds the one on the cam side yet. I see we have a chain tensioner for the cam chain. But right now, I'm going to take this side cover off and see what I can see through here. Okay, cool thing. This bolt here was a 10mm head. The top and bottom ones here were 8s. This bolt went all the way through into this other side over here. So now we can see the cam chain. Okay, that went pretty smooth. Okay, the cylinder head is loose, so it looks like we do just need to get this sprocket to come off somehow. I'm always curious to see how things work. Probably don't need to take this out because I did take the spring out, but I just can't help it. So I guess it's like a ratchet. It doesn't, if you can see it, it doesn't go back unless you release this. And then the spring pushes it down, and it can't push back in. Interesting. Oh, there we go. So we did get it loose. So now this should just slide right off. And there we have our little baby cylinder head. So all we're going to do is take a little material off for the diameter, and then take some more diameter off on the bottom to give it a little bit flatter path here so we can get a little more airflow in. Here's a good visual to show you the difference in size between the stock intake and the Hetrick. So we're going to just gasket match this. What I'm going to do is just take this marker. I've got the gasket right where it's going to be, and I'm just going to mark up. This is the material that we need gone. So now I'm going to start grinding on that. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of this out, and we're going to taper it back in as far as we can, and then also get way in there and get some of the stuff off the bottom a little bit. Before I get carried away with the grinding on this, I'm going to go ahead and disassemble this head. And you can see I already slid the camshaft out. It just slid right out on me. There's not much holding it in. So it's sitting here on the bench. Those are the caps for adjusting the valves. So what I did here was I just reached in here with a bolt and got a hold of that, and it slides right out. We'll do it with the other side. Slides right out. Then we can take our rocker arms out. And I found a socket that just fits in that hole where that bearing is. We're just going to give it a little tap. Oh, I guess we didn't even need to do that. Popped right out. Now it's already all dirty. So it's just, I'll just clean this up before I put it back in. And we'll go ahead and get grinding on this.